All right, so let's dive into something pretty interesting with the New York Yankees. You've probably heard the news already about
Yeah.
the big change with the facial hair.
Right.
The Yankees are, after almost 50 years, those iconic pinstripes are going to be a little less, well, clean shaven. It's kind of a big deal,
That's
right?
something they do.
So we've got a couple of news articles here that really break down the whole thing. And honestly, I think this goes deeper than just some fuzz on some chins. You know what I mean?
Oh, I-
This is about tradition and image and maybe even a little bit of rebellion. Like, I don't know.
yeah.
So what we're going to do in this deep dive is try to figure out what this change actually means for the team, dig into the history behind this whole rule,
Right.
and kind of explore why it's gotten so much attention. I mean, I'm fascinated by it.
Well, it is. I mean, what's fascinating about it is that the Yankees are often seen as this bastion of tradition, almost like resistant to change.
Yeah.
And yet, here they are moving beyond that, the clean-shaven or mustache-only rule that's been in place since 1976.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think we even have a direct quote here from Hal Steinbrenner himself from one of these articles saying, "It is the appropriate time to move beyond the familiar comfort of our former policy." I mean, for an organization that is practically synonymous with tradition, this feels like a real turning point. What do you think, prompted this shift?
You have to consider, the cultural context.
Yeah.
Back when George Steinbrenner, Hal's dad, instituted the rule beards, weren't exactly associated with the clean-cut corporate image the Yankees cultivated. It's a very different era back then. It was an era heavily influenced by military ideals of discipline and uniformity. I mean, think about it. George Steinbrenner himself had a military background.
Right.
That likely played a huge role in shaping the team's culture back then.
It's true. You're right. It's almost like those neatly trimmed mustaches, like you said, were part of the uniform, like a way of projecting this certain image of control, of conformity.
Exactly. And it wasn't even just about appearances.
Right.
It was also about sending a message. We are the Yankees. We do things a certain way.
Yeah.
And there's a certain standard of professionalism that comes with wearing those pinstripes.
Yeah. That brings us to the legendary Yankee way. I mean, this facial hair policy really became symbolic of that whole ethos, didn't it?
Yeah,
Discipline, tradition, no nonsense. It was all kind of reflected in that clean-shaven look.
absolutely. And it's really interesting how this, seemingly superficial rule became so intertwined with the team's identity,
Yeah. Yeah.
For fans, it was part of what made the Yankees, well, the Yankees.
And let's not forget that this rule wasn't without its challenges, right?
Oh, of course.
There were some pretty iconic Yankees who famously clashed with the facial hair policy. Don Mattingly's mullet and goatee in the 90s
oh, yeah,
definitely comes to mind. That was a bold statement.
it was. Mattingly's goatee was a perfect example of that push and pull between individual expression and organizational expectation.
Ah, yeah.
And then, of course, you had Goose Gossage and his legendary Fu Manchu mustache.
Oh, yeah.
That was almost a symbol of defiance in itself.
Right. It's like these players were testing the boundaries, pushing back against this very visible symbol of the Yankee way. It makes you wonder, did those instances, those little acts of rebellion, play any role in the eventual decision to change the policy? What do you think?
I mean, it's certainly possible. Hal Steinbrenner, from what I read, did consult with both former and current players before making this decision.
Wow.
So you can bet those conversations probably included some different opinions on the matter.
That's a great point. It would be fascinating to be a fly on the wall during those meetings.
Oh, I know.
Really get a sense of, the back and forth. It makes you realize that this change wasn't just a snap judgment.
Oh, no.
It was a carefully considered move, likely influenced by a variety of factors, and I think that's interesting. So let's get into that. So speaking of those conversations, how do you think the players themselves are reacting to this news? I mean, this is a pretty big deal for them.
Oh, absolutely. For some, it's probably a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Finally being able to express themselves a bit more freely without facing disciplinary action. I mean, remember Devin Williams,
Yeah.
the all-star closer that the Yankees just acquired?
Right.
He had to shave his beard when he joined the team. Can you imagine how that felt?
Yeah, I mean, that must have been kind of a tough pill to swallow,
Yeah.
I mean, it makes you wonder if those kinds of restrictions actually played a role in some players choosing to sign with other teams.
Oh, yeah.
We've got former Yankees like Gleyber Torres and Clay Holmes rocking beards with their new team.
It's definitely a factor to consider. Players today have more power than ever before. And they're not afraid to exercise it.
Yeah.
I think teams can no longer just dictate every aspect of a player's appearance. They have to adapt to the changing landscape, and I think the Yankees are recognizing that.
This whole thing really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, does a team's appearance policy actually have any impact on its performance, or is it more about symbolism and perception?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
we tend to associate certain qualities with appearances, right? Clean cut often equals disciplined, professional. But is that really true?
Right. Some might say it's all about mindset. You can be a fierce competitor with a beard or without one, you know? Look at guys like James Harden in the NBA, or heck, even Brian Wilson back in the day with the Giants. Those guys were all business on the field, beards and all.
Exactly. And this whole discussion reminds me of something. It's not just about facial hair. It's about control. Teams wanting to control their players' image, trying to create a uniform brand. But the players are individuals too, and they want to express themselves. This push and pull is fascinating to observe.
It's like we're seeing a shift in the power dynamics of professional sports, right? Players are gaining more autonomy, and teams are having to adjust their approach.
Absolutely. And this move by the Yankees could be a sign of things to come. Will other teams with strict appearance policies follow suit? Will we see like a wave of bearded players across the league? It's definitely a possibility.
I mean, imagine the NHL playoffs. What happens to those glorious playoff beards? Do they just become a year-round thing?
Haha. It's fun to imagine. And it all circles back to this tension between tradition and modernity.
Yeah.
You know, how much do you hold on to the old ways and when do you embrace change? Especially in a sport like baseball, steeped in history and ritual, these decisions are not taken lightly.
You know, it's like the Yankees are saying, look, we can respect our tradition and still evolve with the times. It's a delicate balance, but they're making a statement.
And it's a statement that could have ripple effects across the entire league. Other teams might be watching closely, seeing how this plays out for the Yankees. It could be the start of a real cultural shift in professional sports.
We're talking about more than just beards here, right? We're talking about a change in mindset, a recognition that individuality and self-expression don't have to undermine team unity.
Yeah, it really makes you think about what it means to be a team in the modern era. It's not just about conforming to a certain image, it's about embracing the unique qualities of each individual and harnessing that collective power.
I mean, it's pretty amazing to think that something as simple as facial hair can spark such a wide-ranging conversation.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of these deep dives, right? We
Yeah.
start with something seemingly straightforward,
Right.
and we end up exploring all these like fascinating layers of culture, tradition, even psychology.
It's true. Okay, so let's bring it all back for everyone listening, right? The New York Yankees, a team practically built on tradition,
Yeah.
have decided to loosen up a little bit, allowing players to sport beards. It's a change that reflects a shift in those cultural norms that we talked about
Right.
and the evolving dynamics between players and teams. I mean, it's fascinating.
And as we've been discussing, it raises some really intriguing questions, right?
Sick.
Does this change signal a move away from that, like Yankee way?
Right, right.
Will it affect their performance, their image? Could this even be the start of like a league-wide beard revolution?
Yeah, who knows?
We don't have all the answers, but that's part of what makes this so compelling.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's not about finding those definitive answers. It's about exploring the possibilities and challenging those assumptions that we all have.
I mean, here's a final thought for you to consider. As we've seen, traditions aren't static, right? They evolve,
Yeah.
sometimes fading away, sometimes being reinvented. I mean, who would have thought the Yankees would ever embrace beards? It's crazy.
It really is. It's almost like they're acknowledging that times change
Hmm.
and holding on to outdated traditions can actually hold you back.
So the question is, what does this evolution of tradition tell us about the changing culture of the game itself? Are we becoming more accepting of individuality in a sport that's often prized conformity? Makes you think.
It really does. As a baseball fan, how do you feel about this change? Do you think it's a step in the right direction or a betrayal of the team's identity? It's a conversation worth having. And we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas. It's really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, maybe the next time you see a player with a beard, you'll think a little deeper about the story behind it.
Yeah.
It might just be a reflection of a much bigger shift happening in the world of sports and beyond. It's a big deal.
It is. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the hairy details of the Yankees' new policy. There's always more to uncover, more to discuss, and more to learn. So
Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
absolutely. See? Yeah.